Lovely ball through Doué, flag stays down, it's taken by Kylian. And he's being mobbed by everybody from the Paris Saint-Germain bench.
Paris, the city of light, the city of style, and for over a decade, the city of broken dreams. They had the money, they had the stars, they had Messi, Neymar, and Kylian Mbappé, a generational talent built to carry this club to glory. And they had absolutely nothing to show for it. No Champions League, no dynasty, just an endless parade of humiliations dressed up in gold. Then, in the summer of 2023, a man from Asturias walked through the doors of the Parc des Princes and said something that no one at this club had ever had the courage to say out loud. Luis Enrique looked the media straight in the eye and said it without blinking. "Our game does not consist in letting Mbappé do what he wants. That was the old philosophy, which never won a major trophy." Silence in the room. Journalists exchanged glances. Because Mbappé was PSG, he was the investment, the marketing campaign, the reason 80,000 people filled the Parc des Princes every other week. And this man, this stubborn, brilliant, infuriating Spaniard, had just declared it was over. He was right, and within 2 years, he would prove it on the grandest stage in football. This is the story of how Luis Enrique didn't just change a football team, he changed what it meant to play for Paris Saint-Germain. A club built on sand. To understand what Luis Enrique walked into, you have to understand what PSG had become. Not a football club, a showroom. Since Qatar Sports Investments took over in 2011, Paris Saint-Germain spent over 2 billion euros in transfer fees alone. 2 billion. They signed Neymar for 222 million. They signed Messi. They built a squad so expensive that it should have, by any reasonable logic, dominated European football for a decade. It didn't. And the reason wasn't money. It was philosophy, or rather, the total absence of one. And the people watching from the inside knew exactly what the problem was. French football expert Julien Laurent didn't mince his words. PSG was run by the superstars. If they didn't want to do something, they wouldn't do it. They would go straight to the president. It undermined the coach. Managers came and went. Emery, Tuchel, Pochettino, Galtier. Each one tried to impose order on a dressing room where egos had been given more power than tactics. Tuchel reportedly had to apologize to players after issuing instructions they didn't like. Pochettino's obsession, journalists said, was simply keeping the peace, never daring to confront Messi or Mbappé, never making the decisions that needed to be made. And the results were predictable. The remontada in 2017, a 6-1 collapse in Barcelona after winning the first leg. The implosion against Manchester United in 2019, a team of superstars repeatedly exposed in the only competition that mattered, because individual brilliance, without collective structure, eventually falls apart. Luis Enrique knew this better than anyone. He was the man on the other side of the remontada. He was the Barcelona coach who orchestrated that comeback. He understood precisely how a team without defensive discipline crumbles under pressure. And now, he had been handed the broken pieces of PSG and asked to build something new. For years, PSG was everything Luis Enrique stood against, and he knew it. "I never imagined myself coaching PSG because their policy was to attract the biggest superstars. But now, they want to change." That one word, change, was the only reason he said yes. He accepted the job on one condition. He would do things his way. Every single decision on the pitch would be his. The confrontation. The first thing you need to understand about Kylian Mbappé is that he was never just a player at PSG. He was the institution. When he signed his contract extension in 2022, he reportedly received unprecedented influence over transfers and sporting decisions. He was 23 years old. Then Luis Enrique arrived, and from day one, the dynamic was different. There is a scene captured in a behind-the-scenes documentary that tells you everything about how Luis Enrique operates. It was during PSG's Champions League campaign. They were preparing to face Barcelona, and Enrique called Mbappé in for a one-on-one coaching session. Not to talk about goals, not to talk about attacking movements, but to talk about defense. Michael Jordan, defensive accountability for the world's most expensive footballer. That wasn't a coaching session. That was a declaration of intent. Luis Enrique was not going to pretend that Mbappé's job ended when he gave the ball away. Every player in his system pressed. Every player tracked back. Every player sacrificed. And if you couldn't accept that, if you felt the rules didn't apply to you, then you were the problem, not the solution. The tension between them was never explosive in the way the tabloids wanted. It was quieter, more fundamental. It was a disagreement about what football actually is. For Mbappé, the game had always been built around him. His pace, his finishing, his genius. For Luis Enrique, genius without discipline was just entertainment. And PSG didn't need entertainment. They needed a team. The world was convinced PSG were finished without Mbappé's 40 goals a season. Luis Enrique heard the noise, smiled, and did the math out loud. I'd rather have 4 players who score 12 goals each than one who scores 40. It adds up to more goals overall. The era of the one-man team was over. Mbappé left for Real Madrid in the summer of 2024, and the pundits declared PSG were finished. They had lost their talisman, their superstar, their identity. Luis Enrique looked at the empty chair and saw an opportunity. Clearing the house. The clear-out had already begun before Mbappé left. Luis Enrique moved swiftly and without sentimentality. Neymar, the man PSG had broken world records to sign, was moved on. His talent was undeniable. His lifestyle, his consistency, his commitment to the collective, incompatible with what Luis Enrique was building. Then came Marco Verratti, a darling of the Parisian faithful, a player who had given a decade of his career to the club. But Enrique was known for brutal honesty, and Verratti's reputation for poor lifestyle habits made him a poor fit for the iron-willed culture being installed at the training ground. This was not just squad building, it was demolition. Luis Enrique was tearing out the foundations of an era and replacing them with something completely different. Julien Laurens watched the power shift happen in real time. Luis Enrique is the leader of the club. For a long time, it was run by the superstars. It undermined the coach. Not anymore. In came João Neves, 19 years old, relentless, tireless. Willian Pacho, a defender who pressed like a forward. Desiree Doué, a 19-year-old with ice in his veins and hunger in every movement. And then, in January, the final piece. Ivica Kvaratskhelia, a Georgian winger who could destroy any fullback alive and who was willing to press, track, and sacrifice just as much as he dazzled. These weren't superstars in the traditional PSG sense. None of them had Mbappé's global profile. None of them had Messi's mythology. But every single one of them was prepared to run for each other. That was the only qualification Luis Enrique cared about. PSG could have chosen the safe option. Mourinho, Conte, proven winners with trophies on their shelves. But Julien Laurens understood why they didn't. They wanted someone to build something for the future with patience. He was the best candidate. They considered people like Conte and Mourinho winners, but they win now. They don't really build anything. Luis Enrique fitted what PSG wanted. They didn't want a firefighter. They wanted an architect. The culture shift. Luis Enrique's training sessions at the campus PSG were unlike anything players had experienced before at the club. Grueling, tactical, uncompromising. The fitness demands were at another level entirely, and the man imposing them lived what he preached. The coach just kept telling us, if you don't press and don't defend, someone will take your place. So we all defend. That sentence, simple, direct, almost brutal, captures everything Luis Enrique installed. There are no sacred cows. There are no untouchables. No matter who you are, no matter what you cost, if you don't work, someone else will take your shirt, and they will be grateful for the chance. The transformation of Ousmane Dembélé is perhaps the most vivid proof of what this culture produces. At Barcelona, Dembélé was one of the most frustrating players in world football. Reputation. In his second season under Luis Enrique, he scored 33 goals in 49 matches, more than in his previous 5 seasons combined. Not because his talent suddenly multiplied, but because Luis Enrique placed him at the center of the attack, trusted him with responsibility, and demanded the defensive effort that made the whole machine function. After the Champions League final, Luis Enrique was asked about Dembélé's performance. His answer said everything about what he values. Everyone is talking about the Ballon d'Or. I would give it to Dembélé just for his defensive work. He showed what he was made of. He was a leader. He was humble. Humble. That word is almost radical when you consider what PSG used to represent. Former PSG captain Rai, who won the only European trophy in the club's history back in 1996, the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup, watched this team with admiration. What is most impressive about Luis Enrique's management is the fact that he achieved this in such a short time, and especially with such young players. This shows that his tactical scheme was well understood, that the players believe in him, and that his system is very effective.
The storm before the glory. It wasn't always smooth. Midway through the Champions League campaign, PSG were stumbling. They dominated games, but could not score. Chances were squandered. The old questions returned. Was this just an elaborate possession exercise with no end product? Was Luis Enrique simply repeating the mistakes of his Spain tenure, where La Roja held 77% of the ball, completed over 1,000 passes, and somehow managed just one shot on goal before losing to Morocco? After a defeat to Arsenal in October, a journalist had asked a reasonable question. What went wrong? What is the plan? Why isn't it working? Luis Enrique looked up slowly. I have no intention of explaining my tactics. You wouldn't understand them. Arrogant? Perhaps. But this was a man who had already decided where this season was going to end. He just hadn't told anyone yet, and then came the night that changed everything. January in Paris. Manchester City on the other side. PSG 2 goals down. The crowd restless. And then a comeback. 4-2. The new generation exploding in a rain-soaked Parc des Princes. Doué, Barcola, Dembélé off the bench like a force of nature. A statement so emphatic it seemed to rewrite the entire season. After that night, PSG didn't lose again. They eliminated Liverpool at Anfield. They dismantled Aston Villa. They demolished Arsenal. And by the time they reached Munich for the Champions League final, they weren't the pretenders anymore. Even opposing coaches couldn't hide their admiration. After Liverpool were eliminated at Anfield, Arne Slot was generous in defeat. Luis Enrique made an incredible team. So much pace, so much work rate, so much quality in the midfield. Munich, the payoff. Munich, May 31st, 2025. Paris Saint-Germain versus Inter Milan. The Champions League final. The moment the Qatari owners had spent €2 billion chasing, and the man who delivered it was not thinking about money or trophies or legacy. He was thinking about a 9-year-old girl named Zana. In 2019, Luis Enrique's daughter Zana died from a rare form of bone cancer. She was 9 years old. He had temporarily stepped away from football to be with her, and when he returned changed. A man who had stared at the worst thing imaginable and found a way to keep going. And in Munich, as the ultras unfurled a tifo of Luis Enrique and Zana together, both in PSG colors, planting a flag in the turf, the Allianz Arena held its breath. The final itself was a masterpiece. PSG 5, Inter Milan 0. 2 goals up inside 20 minutes. Clinical, dominant, relentless, the pressing suffocating, the movement fluid. And in injury time, with the trophy already won, 19-year-old substitute Seni Mayulu, on the pitch for just 2 minutes, added the 5th goal. An unheralded youngster, scoring in the Champions League final. That is not something that happens at elite football clubs, unless those clubs have been built by someone who truly believes the collective is greater than the sum of its parts. Most managers live in fear of the sack. It consumes them, shapes their decisions, makes them cautious when they should be bold. Luis Enrique is not most managers. I'm not afraid of the worst in football. If they sack me, no problem. The next day, I'll go for a cycling trip. And that freedom, that complete absence of fear, is exactly what made him dangerous. This is a man with perspective. This is a man who knows what actually matters. And perhaps that is precisely why he was able to do what no one else could. Legacy. They said PSG couldn't win without superstars. Luis Enrique proved they couldn't win with them. He didn't just transform a football team, he changed what the club stood for. From glamour to grit, from ego to effort, from celebrity to character. He took the most expensive squad in history and made it irrelevant by building something no amount of money could buy, a team that believed in each other. Pep Guardiola did it at Barcelona. He did it at Manchester City, but he started those journeys with different raw material. Luis Enrique did it at PSG, a club that had been structurally broken for over a decade, and he did it in 2 years. When Marquinhos lifted the trophy into the Munich sky, the golden confetti falling like a long overdue promise finally kept, the man standing on the grass wasn't pumping his fists or screaming. He was looking up. Maybe he was looking at the stars.
Pour toi, qui ne cessera jamais.